We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish.
banks, Hollywood is about to unleash another blockbuster, Angels and Demons, from the same guys who brought you the Da Vinci Code. The story exposes a secret society called the Illuminati, but this shadowy group has a very real secret that stretches all the way to Arizona. Investigative reporter Tammy Leitner brings us a story of money, murder, and mystery right here in the Valley.
We are under attack from an old enemy.
Find Professor London.
The race to save the Vatican and all of humanity from the clutches of the Illuminati is great fiction on the big screen. But the powerful organization is no myth.
The Illuminati do exist.
Our modern Illuminati mystery brings us to the most unlikely of places, Sun City, the quintessential retirement community. And among the retirees, a man with a secret. Paul Marcinkus was once a papal guard, an archbishop, and president of the Vatican Bank.
Oh no, he knew quite a bit.
And what Marcinkus knew is at the center of a conspiracy theory that has endured for decades. Attorney Jonathan Levy has been locked in a legal battle with the Vatican Bank for years. He says Marcinkus is the central figure in the mysterious death of this man, Roberto Calvi. Calvi, like Marcinkus, was an Italian banker.
They very well were the Illuminati, at least in Italy. Powerful people behind the scenes operating in secrecy.
In 1982, Calvi was found hanged from the Blackfriars Bridge in London. It was staged to look like a suicide. Calvi was connected to the disappearance of more than $1.2 billion, much of it belonging to the Vatican and the Illuminati. Eventually, 5 people would be convicted in his murder, but Marcinkus, who was indicted, eluded questioning with help from the Vatican. His retirement to Arizona was arranged with full diplomatic immunity granted by the church. Extradition was denied again and again. And he kept his secret, never speaking to reporters, to investigators, or members of his congregation at St. Clement of Rome in Sun City. Decades of whispers were silenced forever with the death of Marcinkus in his home 3 years ago.
Do you think the secret dies with him?
I think he was a true foot soldier of the church, and that we'll stand a much better chance of finding out about the Kennedy assassination.
We did ask the Phoenix Archdiocese to talk to us about Marcinkus, but they refused, releasing only this statement. Those priests who knew him in his retirement are not going to go on camera and speculate about rumor and innuendo that they know nothing about. And so the mystery endures. I'm Tammy.
In actuality, it was anything but a bank. It was essentially a Nazi money laundering operation that had a lot of tentacles into a lot of different other businesses. And he did all that he could to proselytize for Hitler and the rise of the Third Reich.
Meine Damen und Herren, wir freuen uns, dass wir heute mit Ihnen hier zusammenkommen können, nachdem wir die vergangenen 100 Tage gut genutzt haben. Wo stehen wir in diesem Zusammenhang, wenn wir uns über die Zukunft Gedanken machen? Und da haben wir uns nach den Kunden ausgerichtet, haben gefragt, was ist es, was Kunden von uns erwarten? Dann augenscheinlich erwarten wir Stabilität, Stärke. Die können wir demonstrieren durch eine adäquate Kapitalausstattung, durch eine gute Liquiditätsposition. Wir erwarten auch, dass die Kunden Wert darauf legen, dass sie hervorragende Dienstleistungen bekommen. Dienstleistungen, die bürgerfreundlich sind, nachhaltig sind und die gleichzeitig auch dafür mittragen werden, dass sie zu akzeptablen Konditionen angeboten werden.
After Adolf Hitler came to power instituting the Third Reich, Deutsche Bank dismissed its 3 Jewish board members in 1933. In subsequent years, Deutsche Bank took part in the Aryanization of Jewish-owned businesses. According to its own historians, the bank was involved in 363 such confiscations by November 1938. During the war, Deutsche Bank incorporated other banks that fell into German hands during the occupation of Eastern Europe, confiscating their treasuries into the financial holdings of the Third Reich. Among these holdings were confiscated items such as currency, jewelry and gold held in the safe deposit boxes of exterminated Jews, undesirables and sectarian Protestant dissidents. Deutsche Bank provided banking facilities for the Gestapo and loaned the funds used to build the Auschwitz camp and the nearby IG Farben facilities. IG Farben was the same chemical company that employed the Polish chemist Karol Joseph Wojtyła, who was later appointed Pope of Rome after the murder of Pope John Paul I by the Jesuit Nazi cabal within the Vatican. Deutsche Bank did not reveal its involvement in Auschwitz until February 1999. In December 1999, Deutsche Bank along with other major German companies contributed to a $5.2 billion compensation fund following lawsuits brought by Holocaust survivors. The history of Deutsche Bank during the Second World War has been documented by independent historians commissioned by the bank. George W. Bush threw up roadblocks to stop an independent investigation of events surrounding 9/11. When the 9/11 Senate Committee report was finally published, 27 pages which would have connected international banking to 9/11 were censored. Put options on the two airlines involved in the 9/11 events and insurance companies liable for the insurance coverage of the events that would soon occur, mysteriously skyrocketed 900% the very week before 9/11 occurred. One of these banks mysteriously heavily positioned in the option market just before 9/11 occurred was Germany's Deutsche Bank. And it was no accident that the former director of the CIA also just happened to be the manager of Deutsche Bank just before 9/11.
Yeah, we've been in federal court for 10 years now. We filed the lawsuit in 1999 seeking return of Nazi gold from the Vatican Bank, and the Vatican has tried every legal trick in the book to get that case out of there, including going to the U.S. ambassador to the Vatican, going to Condoleezza Rice, and we've hung in there, and we're still continuing. Jesuits, Franciscans, in fact, we're suing the Franciscan order as well, but to start at the beginning, as World War II was wrapping up, a group from former Yugoslavia called the Ustasha, which ran the Nazi puppet government in Croatia, started evacuating all the gold and loot they had gotten from concentration camps, whose victims mainly were Serbs, Orthodox Christians, and they were welcomed at the Vatican. A 10-truck convoy of loot was driven into St. Peter's Square and deposited at the Vatican Bank in 1946. U.S. intelligence knew about it, but none of this came out until 1997 or 1998 when the U.S. State Department released information, and we followed it up after that point, did the research, got the declassified documents, sued the CIA to get the declassified documents, and filed a lawsuit in federal court for return of the gold or an accounting of what happened to it. The chase on the Illuminati, how do you move literally tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold after the end of the Second World War, when you know it's contraband, Italy's occupied by the U.S. Military? Well, you do it in connection with some very powerful folks. And people in the CIA, Jim Angleton, who went on to be head of CIA counterintelligence, was involved. British intelligence, the MI6, was involved with this plot. And it leads up into current banking at the Vatican Bank, going on into the Calvi murder, and up into the 1990s with the breakup of Yugoslavia. Who financed all that? Who bought the arms for the Croatians? In suing the Vatican Bank, we forced them to give up information about how they operate. Now, what they'll tell you is that they aren't really a bank. Well, it's probably true. They're more like a fencing operation masquerading as a bank. Their charter says that they can take all property, movable and immovable. Well, that's just about everything you can think of, any sort of valuable. Painting, a gold brick, antiquities, whatever you want to bring in there. The key to getting something into the Vatican Bank is the magic words, church property. If you can turn your loot, your stolen property, into church property, it goes in the front door at the Vatican Bank and out the back door. And the Nazis aren't the only ones who have done it. The Mafia has used the Vatican Bank for years, and a fella who I've been in contact, Marty Frankel, is sitting in a federal prison in Texas for his part in the disappearance between somewhere of $50 million and $250 million of insurance money. All went into the Vatican Bank. And the reason is, of course, they have diplomatic immunity. Archbishop Marcinkus, that little piece from Phoenix was about, lived in Sun City. He was a criminal. He was wanted by the Italian authorities, but no one could touch the man because he had diplomatic immunity conferred upon him by the smallest country in the world, the Holy See. Remember, the Pope wears 3 hats. He's head of the church, he's the Prince of Vatican City, and he's head of a sovereign entity called the Holy See, which has diplomatic relations with well over 150 countries. The Vatican will come out with some phony figures every year saying they're worth about $24 million. The wealth is unbelievable, and it's what we've discovered in just suing the Franciscan order was that at one address in California, at one little address at one monastery in California, 24 different corporations were registered. Now, you add that up from place to place, and there are literally tens of thousands of entities masquerading as independent entities that are all really the Catholic, the secret society. But it's not just a secret society, it's a secret society that uses spiritual warfare. And not just economic, but spiritual warfare as well. I think there is such a thing as good and evil, and as others have said, you know, we look at warfare, and you have political warfare, economic warfare, and there's another dimension, which is spiritual warfare. And some things are done that are just so evil and contrary to humanity that you'd have to say it goes beyond mere economics and politics. There's no question that Croatia received its funding from the Vatican or Vatican financiers in 1990, 1991. And that's where we think a lot of the Nazi loot went to eventually, to break up Yugoslavia, which was, after all, the goal of the Germans, of the Vatican, and of the Croatians, who killed the Austrian Archduke in 1914 and caused the fall of all the empires. They blame the Serbs for that. That's why the Serbs have always been on the chopping block there in the Balkans. That's the excuse, at least. And, of course, the excuse, again, for breaking up Yugoslavia, turning it into a bunch of mini-states. But we aim to see, where did this money go to and what was it used for? And to correct you there, no, the Vatican does not admit that it ever took any Nazi gold. They'll do everything possible but to admit to any kind of wrongdoing. We know we have a eyewitness, thank God, a U.S. intelligence agent named Bill Gallen, who was there in Rome, 1946, 1947, as a young counterintelligence special agent for the U.S. Army, and he investigated this, and he gave 4 days' worth of testimony at a deposition, verifying everything that I'm telling you today. Verifying that a 10-truck convoy went first to a monastery in Rome, where they changed out from British license plates to Vatican ones and drove right in there to St. Peter's Square, claiming they had church property on it. And he interviewed and debriefed the people involved in that operation. The Vatican Bank, also known as the Institute for Religious Works, has been involved in one scandal after another, and many scandals that we aren't even aware about because they got away with it. The Calvi case was high finance at its worst. It involved the largest bank in Italy, Banco Ambrosiano, involved operations in the Bahamas, and ultimately in North America. Some people claim it triggered the savings and loan crisis in the 1980s. And it was a purposeful destabilization of Italy's largest bank by a group called the P2, who I think were Illuminati, and one of their many guises, the idea being to take over Italy. And it caused disruptions worldwide. The people involved, Tindona and Calvi, both died mysteriously. Marcinkus went into hiding in Sun City, Arizona. And the epicenter of the whole thing was the Vatican. First of all, some of the symbolism, even the flag of the European Union and of the Council of Europe is taken from the altar at the Cathedral of Strasbourg. There's those stars, circular stars, and there was a forerunner to the European Union called the trying to think Pan-Europa Union, and it was the same flag except with a cross in the middle of it. Bottom line, they ought to drag the books, the account books out of the Vatican and audit them. That's what they ought to do. And if you did that, you'd get to the bottom of a lot of mysteries, including maybe even what happened to Bernie Madoff's billions. Who knows what's in there? We're on the 6th amended complaint, which means we've had to amend the lawsuit 6 times. Of course, the Vatican has bottomless legal resources. Right now, the case against the Vatican Bank itself is up again in the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, this time on the issue of immunity. Can you even sue the Vatican Bank in the United States? And then the other part of the lawsuit is proceeding, slowly but proceeding, and that's against the Franciscan order, who were the actual foot soldiers of the church involved in laundering this concentration camp money.
Why hasn't the Catholic Church been prosecuted under the federal RICO laws of organized crime? Because it was set up to get the mafia. They're an organization that was involved in felony of covering it up. All the molestation and all that, those are felonies, and this is an organization involved in perpetrating those felonies. That's what the RICO laws were written for. Why have they not been charged?
It is pretty amazing that, in any other office in the country, if you just made a joke about kids, they'd come and put the cuffs on it.
It's just, but I would like to have that question answered. Why don't they fall under the federal RICO laws of organized crime? They're an organization involved in felonies, multiples, and they move people around to protect them, and all of that stuff. So,
07-11-22 beginning. 8300. Adrian. 8362, 28 Minnetonka, 9901 North Miami Beach Boulevard, parking lot of K-Mart, case number 90118, complainant is invading unit 86 White Highway.
is that we have been exposing the biggest corruption story in the history of the world. I'm going to talk about Germany. Now, in the first peroration, we were told about the Germans when they took us over about 1,200 years ago. Well, they're engaged in the same operation. Because contrary to the general view, we did not win the war. What happened was, we finished Hitler off. We personalised the war, so we thought that when Hitler ceased to exist, ostensibly, we thought we'd won the war, but that is not what happened. In practice, what happened was that in about 1941, it was in 1941, at the Wannsee Conference, the Nazi intelligentsia realised that there must be a 50-50 chance that the Germans would lose the war. And so what they did was they exported their big brains to Madrid. And in 1942 they set up what they called the German Geopolitical Centre. And if you go back into that part of history, you'll see that it is quite often mentioned that all the big hotels in Madrid were full of Gestapo and Germans. Now, the German geopolitical centre did nothing but think about what would happen if Germany didn't succeed in taking over Europe. And in other words, it was a long-term think tank, and they developed a long-range perception strategy. The long-range perception strategy was originally set out in a work or a book of seminars, or a seminar document called Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, European Economic Community, published in 1942 in Berlin, which is mentioned in my book, The European Union Collective, details of which are out there. The European Union is, of course, not our friend, it is our enemy, and has been all along, with its purpose is to usurp our sovereignty and take us over. And in fact, what we now have was instrumental in persuading President Ford to dismiss William Colby as DCI, the Director of Intelligence, in favour of George H.W. Bush. Now, George Bush is the representative in the United States of Deutscher Verteidigungsdienst, which is the German black agency based, believe it or not, in Dachau.